In chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, God gives us an instruction on how to deal with thieves. And I wanted to talk about this because a few years ago, before I thought about this whole concept, I had a very, very big problem with these verses. So in chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, God says, "As for the man who steals and a woman who steals, cut off their hands for what they have earned, an exemplary punishment from God. And God is mighty wise. But whoever repents after their injustice and reforms, surely God will turn to them, and surely God is forgiving and merciful." So God gives us a clear instructions that we have to deal with thieves in this way. So a punishment for somebody who steals, ultimate punishment, a punishment that should never be off the table, is to cut off their hands. And God explains why this is so. So when you really think about law and order and how this applies to our society, let's consider our society the way it is now. What happens to thieves, armed robbers, fraudsters, any which way people use to steal? They get locked up. So is that effective, and how long can we do this? So first of all, it isn't effective. We have clear proof that it isn't effective. The recidivism rate is very, very high, and people get reincarcerated over and over and over for this problem. So it does not work. Moreover, you can't do this forever, especially now if you consider that the government of the United States is in debt, somewhat $20 trillion now, $22 trillion. I don't even know anymore. And somebody has to pay the bill to house the offenders. So we're talking about $50,000 a year plus for all these people. Not only that, when you house somebody, when you incarcerate somebody, what you do is you basically create, basically prevent them to create any positive social circles. Life isn't about really what you know, it's about who you know. And when you get incarcerated, the only people you are going to know is other criminals. So when you send people to prison, not only do you send them, not only do you take away their ability to create any positive social networks, you basically force them to create bad social networks. So when they come out, this is all they know. They lose their positive influences around them because they went to prison. And not only that, basically they master their trade. They improve their trade. They are better at what they do. So and even after they come out, with the way current laws are, they can't find a job because they are a felon. So when you take this approach, you basically take a person that may have made a mistake, and you take away their whole ability to improve. So some would say, well, that's still better than cutting off their hand and making them, handicapped for the rest of their life. And that's right. That's absolutely right. That's why God says in these verses, "But whoever repents after their injustice and reforms, then surely God will turn to them. God is merciful." And that's how the verse ends. God is forgiving and merciful. So God really doesn't instruct us to cut off a hand of a 16-year-old kid who stole a candy bar. God does not instruct us for this to be the first option. God says, whoever repents and reforms. So God says, give them a chance, but this should never be off the table. Cutting off somebody's hand for stealing should never be off the table. But mercy is always first. So God instructs us that mercy is always first. So when you show person mercy and they continue to steal, this is when this starts to come into effect. So let's say, somebody steals, somebody does something, and you just show them mercy. Okay, you give them a warning, you put them on probation, you don't send them to jail, you allow them to try to make some positive circles, positive social connections, stay in life of their family. And then if they reoffend, and we have plenty of examples of people reoffending. Let's just take drug abusers. They're not really bad people, but what's on the inside, I don't believe that they're bad people, but what they are doing is bad. And these people tend to steal over and over and over and over and over and over again. Unfortunately, if they do not control themselves, then their punishment is to lose their hands. And it is always cheaper to keep these people on the street than it is to lock them up. Because we have to understand this system cannot work. The way we're doing it now cannot work because we are going to run out of money. The only reason why we believe that this system is even okay is because we have enough money to throw at it still. We're not seeing it fall apart. And we will see it fall apart when there is no more money. How will you stop them then? So having these people lose their hands, unfortunately, nobody wants to cut anybody's hands off, but this is the right thing to do. This is from God, and that's how I know it's the only thing that works. Well, it isn't. That's not how I know that it's the only thing that works. I actually sat down and thought about this. Initially, these verses really got me questioning my faith because I was repelled by them. I prefer mercy. I don't want to do this to people. But now I understand it is the only way because some people are unrepentant. And we cannot allow victims to continue to be victimized. These people are the criminals. They are the criminals. And if they are repeat criminals, we cannot allow people to be victimized anymore. It is more brutal to do nothing. It is more brutal to do something that does not work. It is more cruel to do that than it is to cut the hands off of criminals who refuse to reform. And God says this is an exemplary punishment from God. We live in social networks. So criminals live in social networks. People who steal know other people who steal. They're not out there on an island by themselves. People who steal know other people who steal. So when they show up with their hand cut off, they are an example of what can happen. And God willing, that will help some people change. I know it will help some people change. When people see that there's no more playing, that will help them change. So this approach is better in every single way than what we do now. Number one, people get a second chance. Number two, we do not destroy the people's ability to make positive social networks and force them to create negative social networks by sending them to colleges for criminals, where they actually have to become more criminals in order to fit in that society, in order to survive in prison. They become more criminal. When they come out, they have no options. They have very little options, and everybody they know are probably prior criminals except their own family. The economy is collapsing. The economy is not collapsing yet, but the debt is going to catch up with us. And one day, there will be no money to pay for all these prison guards and all of that. There will not be enough money. So this cannot go on. So the system is ineffective in so many ways. And then when you look at the system that God decrees, it is cheap. It is merciful. It is effective. I say it is merciful because forgiveness is always prioritized. But if you choose to keep doing what you're doing, then it is your own fault. You will unfortunately serve as an example to the rest of people. God's laws are better than anything that we can think of, and they're very simple. They're cheap, they're efficient, they're effective, they're simple, and they are merciful. They may not be merciful to a person who decides to steal and rob and defraud and do all these things. Even then, they're merciful for them initially. But we cannot allow these people to keep doing this because we have to consider their victims. We have to be merciful to their victims. We have to stop them. And some people, unfortunately, there is only one way to stop them. Nobody can steal without hands. So I wanted to explain this because it is logic. What God decreed is not in any way or shape cruel or unusual. It is only logical, and it is the only effective thing. So I hope people understand it now. Yes, it will throw you off like it did me. But when you just sit down and think about it, when you consider the way life is, when you consider the way reality is, you will see that this is the only way. So I just wanted to explain that.